Some people mistake kindness for weakness. They see a gentle smile, a willingness to accommodate, and they think they've found an easy target. My daughter-in-law, Jasmine Caldwell, made that exact mistake when she demanded I hand over my late husband's wedding ring. I said yes and watched her world crumble piece by piece. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Catherine Holloway, and at 63, I've learned that the most devastating battles aren't fought with raised voices or dramatic confrontations. They're won with patience, precision, and the kind of quiet intelligence that people consistently underestimate in women my age. The ring Jasmine coveted wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was a 1952 platinum band set with a rare 2-carat Burmese sapphire, surrounded by diamonds that caught light like trapped stars. My beloved husband, Thomas, had it custom-made during his deployment in Korea, trading his entire year's savings and a few precious family heirlooms to a jeweler in Seoul. When he slipped it onto my finger 41 years ago in the small chapel of Millfield, our hometown nestled in the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, he whispered, "This ring will outlast us both, Catherine. Let it remind whoever wears it that real love requires sacrifice." Thomas had been gone for 3 years now, claimed by cancer that ate away at his strength, but never touched his spirit. The ring had remained on my finger through his illness, through the sleepless nights at Millfield General Hospital, through the funeral where half the town came to pay their respects to a man who'd spent 4 decades teaching high school mathematics and coaching Little League baseball. It was the last physical connection I had to the love that had shaped my entire adult life. But Jasmine saw something different when she looked at that ring. She saw dollar signs. My son, David, had married Jasmine 2 years ago in what I can only describe as a whirlwind romance that left everyone in our family slightly dizzy. She was 28 to his 35, a striking woman with cascading auburn hair and the kind of polished beauty that turned heads at the Millfield Country Club. David, my gentle, hard-working boy who managed the local branch of Riverside Bank, was absolutely smitten. From the beginning, I tried to see what he saw in her. Jasmine had grown up in the affluent suburbs of Hartford, Connecticut, the daughter of a successful real estate developer who'd apparently spoiled her beyond reason. She moved to our small town of Pennsylvania with the air of someone doing us all a tremendous favor, constantly mentioning the quaint charm of Millfield while making it clear she considered it a significant step down from her previous life. The early signs were subtle. At family dinners, she would examine our antique china with a calculating eye, asking pointed questions about its provenance and value. She'd compliment my furniture, always with that slight pause that made you wonder if she was mentally appraising every piece. When she and David moved into the renovated farmhouse on Maple Street, a wedding gift from Thomas and me, she immediately began making comments about updating and modernizing everything. But it was during Thomas's final weeks that I began to see her true nature. While David and I took turns sitting vigil at the hospital, Jasmine made herself scarce. She had headaches or prior commitments or simply couldn't bear to see Thomas in such a weakened state. "It's just too emotional for me, Catherine. You understand." I did understand, but not in the way she meant. The first time she mentioned the ring was at Thomas's funeral reception. We were in the parish hall of St. Mark's Episcopal Church, surrounded by casseroles and condolences, when she approached me with that particular smile she reserved for requests. "Catherine, honey, I've been thinking about family heirlooms and legacy. That beautiful ring of yours, it's such a shame to see it on someone who's, well, finished with that chapter of life. David and I are just starting our journey together. Don't you think Thomas would want it to represent new beginnings rather than, well, endings?" The audacity took my breath away. My husband was barely cold in the ground, and this woman was already circling like a vulture, eyeing what she could claim. But I smiled serenely and patted her arm. "How thoughtful of you to be concerned about family legacy, dear. We'll certainly discuss it when the time is right. That should have been the end of it, but Jasmine wasn't the type to take polite deflection for an answer. Over the following months, the requests became more frequent and less subtle. She'd mention how the ring would look beautiful with her engagement set. She'd talk about having it appraised just to know its value for insurance purposes. She began bringing up Thomas's wishes in conversations, claiming he'd once mentioned wanting his ring to stay in the family line. That last bit was particularly galling, because Thomas had indeed mentioned his wishes about the ring, just not the way Jasmine described. 3 weeks before his death, when the morphine made him lucid only in brief windows, Thomas had gripped my hand with surprising strength.
"Katie," he'd whispered, using the nickname only he was allowed to use, "that ring represents everything we built together. Promise me you'll be careful who gets it. Promise me it won't go to someone who doesn't understand what love really costs." I had promised, and I meant to keep that promise. But Jasmine's campaign was relentless. She recruited David, who began having awkward conversations about Mom maybe being ready to let go of the past. She enlisted her parents during their visits, who made pointed comments about young couples needing family support and meaningful tokens. She even tried to get our pastor, Reverend Mills, to speak to me about the healing power of generous gestures. The breaking point came on a humid Tuesday evening in July, 6 months after Thomas's death. Thomas and Jasmine had come for dinner, and I'd prepared Thomas's favorite meal, pot roast with Yorkshire pudding, green beans from the garden he'd tended for 20 years. We were sitting on the wraparound porch of my Victorian home on Elm Street, watching the fireflies dance over the lawn Thomas had mowed every Saturday for 4 decades. That's when Jasmine decided to make her move. "Catherine," she said, setting down her sweet tea with deliberate ceremony, "David and I have been talking, and we think it's time to address the elephant in the room." I continued rocking in my chair, the same one Thomas had surprised me with for our 20th anniversary. "Oh, what elephant would that be, dear?" "The ring, Mother Holloway." She only called me that when she was trying to assert some kind of authority. "It's been 6 months, and I think we all agree it's time for it to find a new home, a young home where it can be appreciated and worn as it was meant to be." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly uncomfortable with the directness, but unwilling to contradict his wife. "Mom, Jasmine has a point. David would want his memory to live on through new generations, right?" I looked at my son, this kind, naive man who couldn't see past his wife's beautiful facade, and felt my heart break a little. But I also felt something else stirring, something Thomas would have recognized because he'd seen it during our early years when I'd navigated the male-dominated world of Millfield's town council, quietly outmaneuvering opponents who underestimated the school teacher's wife. It was time to show Jasmine exactly what she was dealing with. I stopped rocking and looked directly at her, my expression as serene as a summer morning. "You know what, Jasmine? You're absolutely right." The surprise on her face was almost comical. She'd clearly prepared for resistance, for tears, for guilt. She hadn't prepared for agreement. Really? You mean it?" "I do." I smiled warmly, reaching over to pat her perfectly manicured hand. Thomas would indeed want his ring to go to someone who truly understands its value, someone who appreciates what real love costs, someone worthy of carrying on his legacy. Jasmine's eyes lit up with triumph, and I saw David relax, relief washing over his features. "However," I continued, my voice still gentle, "such an important family heirloom deserves a proper ceremony, a celebration of what it represents. Don't you agree?" "Of course." Jasmine was practically glowing now. "Whatever you think is appropriate, Mother Holloway." "Wonderful. Then we'll do this properly, at the annual Millfield Heritage Festival next month, in front of the whole town, with all our friends and family present. After all, if this ring is going to represent the future of our family, everyone should witness its passing." And that's when I saw it. Just a flicker, but unmistakable. For just a moment, Jasmine's triumphant expression wavered. Some instinct buried deep beneath her greed and entitlement whispered that this was too easy. That Catherine Holloway, the woman who'd raised 4 successful children, who'd run the most efficient charity drives in Millfield's history, who'd managed a household and helped build a family legacy over 4 decades, might not be the pushover she appeared to be. But the ring was within her grasp now, and greed won out over caution. "That sounds perfect," she said, her smile returning full force. "Absolutely perfect." I continued rocking gently, listening to the crickets sing their evening song in Thomas's garden. Jasmine thought she had won. David thought he'd navigated a family crisis successfully. They had no idea that the real story was just beginning. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The morning after I agreed to give Jasmine the ring, I woke up to find 17 missed calls on my phone. 17! Before 7 a.m. All from Jasmine. I made my coffee in Thomas's favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that he'd refused to let me throw away for 15 years, and listened to the voicemails while standing at the kitchen window overlooking his rose garden. "Catherine, hi, it's me. I just wanted to call and say thank you again for being so understanding about the ring. I was thinking maybe we could go to the jeweler together this week, to get it cleaned and maybe resized. Call me back." The next message, 20 minutes later, "Me again. I was just so excited I couldn't sleep. I've been looking up appraisers online. Did you know there's a certified gemologist right here in Millfield? At Morrison's Fine Jewelry on Main Street? We should definitely go there first."
By the 7th message, her voice had taken on an edge I'd never heard before. "Catherine, I'm starting to worry that you're not answering. You're not having second thoughts, are you? Because David and I really think this is what Thomas would have wanted, and it would be such a shame if you let grief cloud your judgment about what's best for the family." That last message made me set down my coffee cup with more force than necessary. The audacity was breathtaking. Not 24 hours had passed since I'd agreed to her demand, and she was already questioning my judgment and invoking my dead husband's wishes to manipulate me. But it was the timing that truly caught my attention. 17 calls before dawn suggested someone who couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything else. This wasn't just greed. This was obsession. And obsession, I knew from 40 years of observing human nature, makes people sloppy. I called her back at exactly 8 a.m. "Jasmine, dear, I got your messages. My goodness, you were up early." "Catherine, I was so worried when you didn't answer. I hope I didn't wake you." "Not at all. I've been an early riser since before you were born, sweetheart. Now, what's this about appraisers?" There was a slight pause, the kind that comes when someone realizes they might have revealed too much enthusiasm too quickly. "Oh, well, I just thought, for insurance purposes, When something so valuable changes hands, it's important to have proper documentation, don't you think?" "Absolutely," I agreed smoothly. "In fact, I was thinking the same thing. We'll want everything properly documented for the ceremony at the Heritage Festival. The whole town will want to know the story behind such a magnificent piece." Another pause. The story? "Of course. You'll need to understand the ring's complete history to properly receive it. Where Thomas got it, what he sacrificed to buy it, what it represented to our marriage. The townspeople will expect you to speak about what it means to carry on that legacy." I could practically hear her mind racing through the phone. "Speak? You mean like a speech?" "Well, naturally. When someone receives a family heirloom of such significance in a public ceremony, they're expected to acknowledge what it represents. Don't worry, dear. I'll help you prepare. We'll need to cover Thomas's deployment in Korea, his work with the Veterans Association, our 41 years together, the values he wanted the ring to represent. Yes, of course. That makes perfect sense. But her voice had lost its earlier excitement. Wonderful! I'll start gathering some old photos and documents for you to review. Thomas kept meticulous records of everything. Oh, and I should mention, his old army buddy, Colonel Harrison, will be there. He's the one who actually introduced Thomas to the jeweler in Seoul. He'll be so pleased to see the ring again and meet the woman who'll be carrying on Thomas's memory. This was a complete fabrication. Colonel Harrison had died 3 years before Thomas, but Jasmine didn't know that. Colonel Harrison? She repeated weakly. Oh, yes! He'll want to hear all about your plans for honoring Thomas's legacy. The colonel is quite passionate about military history and tradition, very particular about respect being shown to fallen comrades. I let that hang in the air for a moment before continuing cheerfully. But don't worry about all that now. We have plenty of time to prepare. The Heritage Festival is still 3 weeks away. I'll call Morrison's Jewelry today and set up an appointment for the appraisal. We'll want everything properly documented before the ceremony. Actually, Catherine, maybe we don't need to rush the appraisal. I mean, it's been in your family for so long, and if you trust its value— Nonsense! You are absolutely right about proper documentation. In fact, I think we should have it appraised by multiple sources. Morrison's first, then perhaps that lovely certified gemologist over in Lancaster County that my friend Beverly recommended. We want to be thorough. By the time I hung up, Jasmine's voice had lost all her morning enthusiasm. She wanted a simple transfer of property. My ring to her finger, end of story. Instead, she was facing public scrutiny, historical research, and multiple professional evaluations of something she'd assumed would be a private family matter. But this was only the beginning of what should have been her first warning. That afternoon, I drove to Morrison's Fine Jewelry on Main Street. Harold Morrison had been in business for 37 years, and his father before him for another 20. If anyone in Millfield knew the value of a ring, it was Harold. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, and Harold looked up from the watch repair he was working on, his jeweler's loop making his right eye appear comically large. "Harrison! Catherine, how lovely to see you, dear. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing, Harold. Actually, I need a favor, and I hope you'll indulge an old customer." I explained the situation, carefully, selectively. I told him about Jasmine's interest in the ring, about wanting it appraised for family planning purposes, about the upcoming Heritage Festival ceremony. What I didn't mention was the full context of Jasmine's demand and my growing suspicions about her true motivations. Harold listened thoughtfully, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment.
"Catherine, I remember when Thomas bought that ring. Not from me, of course. He got it overseas. But he brought it in here maybe 15 years ago to have it cleaned and checked. Wanted to make sure the setting was secure for your anniversary." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It's a remarkable piece. That sapphire, well, it's not just rare because of its size. The color, the clarity, the provenance. Thomas told me he'd traded away his grandfather's pocket watch and his mother's pearl necklace, plus every cent he'd saved during his deployment just to afford it. Yes, he told me that story many times." "Did he also tell you what the jeweler in Seoul said about it?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" Harold set down his loop and looked at me seriously. "The jeweler in Seoul told Thomas that the sapphire came from a mine that had been closed since the 1940s. Something about political unrest in Burma making it impossible to export. That particular shade of blue, from that specific region, Thomas's ring contains what's essentially a piece of gemological history. My heart began to beat a little faster. Harold, what exactly are you telling me? I'm telling you that when Thomas brought it in for cleaning, I suggested he have it properly appraised and insured. The value had probably tripled since he bought it in 1952. Maybe more. And he laughed and said he didn't care what it was worth in dollars. Said its value was in what it represented, not what it could buy. Harold's expression grew concerned. Catherine, you're not thinking of selling it, are you? Because if financial concerns are forcing you to consider— No, Harold, nothing like that, I assured him quickly. But I would like you to do that appraisal we discussed 15 years ago. Discreetly. Of course. When would you like to bring it in? I was hoping you might come to me. Tomorrow evening, perhaps. I'd preferred this be done privately, at least initially. Harold studied my face for a moment, and I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. After 37 years in a small town, he'd developed the same instincts about people that I had. Catherine, is everything all right? You seem concerned about something. Let's just say I want to make sure everyone involved understands exactly what they're dealing with. He nodded slowly. I'll be there at 7 tomorrow evening. And Catherine, whatever's going on, be careful. In my experience, when people get fixated on valuable things that aren't theirs, well, it rarely brings out their better nature. As I drove home, Harold's words echoed in my mind. Jasmine's 17 phone calls before dawn suddenly seemed less like excitement and more like compulsion. Her immediate questions about appraisers looked less like prudent planning and more like someone calculating profit. But it was her reaction to my mention of a public ceremony that truly concerned me. The enthusiasm had drained from her voice the moment she realized the ring transfer wouldn't be a private family matter. She wanted the ring, but she didn't want the scrutiny that would come with properly receiving such a significant family heirloom. The question was, how far would she go to avoid that scrutiny while still claiming her prize? I had a feeling I was about to find out. Harold Morrison arrived at my house the following evening carrying a small black case that looked more like a doctor's bag than jeweler's equipment. I'd prepared tea and set out Thomas's favorite shortbread cookies, the ones I'd been making from his mother's recipe for over 40 decades. Thank you for coming, Harold. I hope this isn't too much trouble. Not at all, Catherine. Though I must admit, I'm curious about the secrecy. He settled into Thomas's old armchair, the one I still couldn't bring myself to move even though it had been empty for 3 years. I slipped the ring from my finger, feeling the familiar weight it leave my hand. It was the first time I'd removed it since Thomas's funeral, and the absence felt like losing a piece of myself all over again. Harold opened his case and withdrew a series of instruments I didn't recognize. Loops of different magnifications, small scales, what looked like a tiny flashlight, and several other devices. He worked in comfortable silence for nearly 20 minutes, occasionally making soft humming sounds that could have been approval or concern. Finally, he set down his loop and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Catherine, I need to ask you something, and I hope you won't take offense. Have you ever had this ring properly appraised by anyone other than me suggesting it 15 years ago? No. Thomas always said its value wasn't monetary, and after he died, I never saw the need. Why?
Harold was quiet for a long moment, turning the ring over in his palm like he was weighing more than just its physical mass. This ring is worth considerably more than I initially estimated. The sapphire alone? Catherine, I'd need to bring in a specialist to be absolutely certain, but based on what I can determine here, this could be worth anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000, possibly more. The teacup I was raising to my lips stopped halfway there. I'm sorry, what? The Burma sapphire market has exploded in the last decade. Pieces from the mines that closed in the 1940s are now considered among the most valuable in the world. Add the craftsmanship of the setting, the historical provenance, and the exceptional clarity of this particular stone. He shook his head. Thomas had no idea what he'd stumbled onto in that Seoul jewelry shop. I set down my cup carefully, my mind racing. $60,000? Jasmine had been circling a ring worth more than most people's annual salary. Harold, if you had to guess, how might someone else have learned about the ring's value? His expression grew troubled. Well, there are several ways. Online research about Burma sapphires, consulting with other jewelers, or... He hesitated. Or what? Or by having it quietly appraised without your knowledge. Catherine, has anyone else had access to this ring recently, even briefly? My blood ran cold as I remembered the last family gathering before Thomas's death. Jasmine had insisted on helping me in the kitchen, and I'd removed my rings to knead bread dough. I'd left them on the counter for maybe 20 minutes while we prepared the meal. Harold, how long would it take for someone to photograph a ring and get a preliminary assessment online? With today's technology, minutes. There are apps that can identify gemstones from photos, online forums where people post pictures for amateur appraisals, even AI programs that can estimate value based on visual characteristics. He paused. Catherine, what aren't you telling me? I told him everything. Jasmine's sudden interest in the ring after Thomas's death, her increasingly aggressive campaign to acquire it, the 17 phone calls before dawn, her immediate questions about appraisers, and her visible discomfort when I mentioned the public ceremony. Harold listened without interruption, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. Catherine, I don't want to alarm you, but this sounds like someone who knows exactly what she's after. The timing, the persistence, the focus on appraisal and documentation. This isn't someone who just likes pretty jewelry. That's what I was afraid of. There's something else. Harold reached into his case and pulled out a small digital camera. He took some detail shots of the ring for documentation purposes. Look at this. He showed me the camera's display screen, zoomed in on a section of the ring's band I'd never paid much attention to. There, etched in tiny script, almost invisible to the naked eye, were markings I'd never noticed. What is that? The jeweler's mark, and what appears to be a date and possibly a certification number? If I'm reading this correctly, this ring wasn't just made in Seoul, it was crafted by one of the most renowned military jewelers of the era, a man named Kim Tae-gyun, who was famous for creating pieces for American servicemen during the Korean War. Harold scrolled to another image. This marking here suggests the sapphire was certified by the Seoul Gemological Institute, which was a very prestigious organization at the time. Catherine, this isn't just a valuable ring, it's a documented piece of military and gemological history. I stared at the tiny markings that had been hidden against my skin for 41 years, carrying secrets I'd never known existed. Harold, what would happen if someone tried to sell this ring without proper documentation of ownership? Well, any reputable dealer would require provenance documentation. Bills of sale, inheritance paperwork, insurance records. Without those, most legitimate buyers would be suspicious. But there are other markets. Private collectors who ask fewer questions, online sales where documentation requirements are more flexible, or even what? Unscrupulous dealers who might be willing to overlook paperwork issues for the right price. The problem is, those kinds of transactions typically result in much lower sale prices. Someone might get $20,000 or $30,000 for a ring worth $60,000, but they'd get it quickly and with minimal questions asked. A chill ran down my spine as the implications became clear. If Jasmine knew the ring's true value, she also knew that selling it through legitimate channels would require paperwork she didn't have and questions she couldn't answer. But if she could establish some kind of legal claim to it, say by having it formally given to her by the original owner, that would solve her documentation problem entirely. Harold, I need to ask you for another favor. Of course. I'd like you to prepare a formal appraisal document, but I don't want you to give it to me yet. Can you hold on to it for a few weeks? Certainly. May I ask why? I thought about how to explain without sounding paranoid or vindictive. Let's just say I want to see how this situation develops before I reveal all the cards in my hand. Harold nodded slowly, and I could see the understanding in his eyes. After nearly 4 decades in business, he'd probably seen his share of family disputes over valuable items.
Catherine, be careful. When people discover they're dealing with something worth this much money, they don't always make rational decisions. After Harold left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the ring now back on my finger. Everything about Jasmine's behavior suddenly made terrible sense. The timing of her interest, her knowledge of appraisal procedures, her pushiness about getting the ring transferred quickly and quietly. But it was what happened the next morning that confirmed my worst suspicions. I was in my garden tending to Thomas's roses when I heard voices from the neighboring yard. Jasmine and David were visiting the Hendersons next door, and they were standing just on the other side of my hedge. "Told you she'd be reasonable about it," David was saying. "Mom's always been generous with family." "I know, but David, you should have seen her yesterday on the phone. All that talk about ceremonies and speeches and documentation. It's like she's trying to make this as complicated as possible." "She's just being thorough. You know how she is about family traditions and proper protocols. Or she's having second thoughts and looking for ways to back out." Jasmine's voice had an edge I'd never heard when she spoke directly to me. "I mean, why does everything have to be so public? Why can't you just give me the ring and be done with it?" "Because it meant everything to Dad, and Mom wants to make sure it's treated with respect." "Respect." Jasmine's tone made the words sound distasteful. "David, that ring has been sitting on her finger doing nothing for 3 years. Your father is dead. The respectful thing would be to let it have a new life with people who can actually appreciate it." I found myself gripping my gardening shears so tightly my knuckles went white. The casual dismissal of Thomas's memory, the impatience with proper ceremony, the focus on the ring doing nothing on my finger. It all painted a picture I didn't want to believe but could no longer deny. "Jasmine, you're being a little harsh, don't you think?" "I'm being realistic. Your mother is a lovely woman, but she's stuck in the past. That ring represents a fortune just sitting there, and we could use that money for our future, our children's future." "Money? I thought you wanted the ring because it was beautiful and meaningful." There was a pause that stretched long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. "Of course, that's what I want it for. I just meant, well, it's good to know it's valuable, too, for insurance purposes." But the damage was done. Even David, sweet and trusting as he was, seemed to sense something off in her response. "Jasmine, you're not thinking of selling it, are you? Don't be ridiculous. I would never. I just think it's important to understand what we're dealing with. Your mother obviously has no idea what that ring is really worth, or she wouldn't be so casual about giving it away." My gardening shears snapped through a rose stem with more force than necessary. So Jasmine did know the ring's value. She'd had it appraised or researched it, probably during one of those times she'd helped in my kitchen and had access to it. And now she was manipulating my son, making him complicit in what amounted to theft disguised as family generosity. But it was what happened the next morning that confirmed my worst suspicions. "David, once your mother gives me that ring at the festival, what's to stop her from changing her mind later? What if she decides she made a mistake and wants it back?" "Mom wouldn't do that. When she gives her word, she keeps it." "I know she means well, but grief can make people unpredictable. One day she's generous, the next day she's angry and demanding the ring back. I just think we should make sure the transfer is legally binding somehow."
Legally binding? Nothing dramatic, just maybe a simple document stating that she's formally gifting it to me for everyone's protection. I had heard enough. Jasmine wasn't just planning to take the ring, she was planning to make sure I could never reclaim it even if I discovered her true motivations. She wanted legal documentation that would allow her to sell it without any interference from me. As I gathered my gardening tools and headed back to the house, I realized that Jasmine had made a crucial error in judgment. She had assumed that a 63-year-old widow would be easy prey for her manipulation. She'd counted on my grief, my politeness, and my desire to maintain family harmony to blind me to her true intentions. But what she hadn't counted on was that Thomas had spent 41 years married to a woman who was considerably smarter and more observant than she appeared. And she certainly hadn't considered that her prey might be perfectly capable of setting a trap of her own. The Heritage Festival was still 2 weeks away. That gave me plenty of time to prepare a ceremony that would give Jasmine exactly what she'd asked for and everything she deserved. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 40 years of marriage, but went through someone else's personal belongings without permission. But desperate times, as Thomas used to say, call for measures you never thought you'd need. David had given me a spare key to their house on Maple Street months ago, back when he was worried about me being alone after Thomas's death. "Just in case you need anything while we're at work, Mom," he said with that gentle concern that reminded me so much of his father.
I waited until Thursday morning, when I knew Jasmine would be at her weekly yoga class at the Millfield Community Center, and David would be at the bank. At 9:15 a.m. sharp, I let myself into their house with the deliberate calm of someone who had every right to be there. The house still bore traces of Thomas's and my influence. The antique dining table we'd given them as a wedding gift, the handmade quilts I'd spent months creating for their guest bedrooms, the family photographs that chronicled 4 generations of Holloways. But Jasmine's touch was evident too, in ways that made me uncomfortable. Price tags had been left on several decorative items, as if she wanted visitors to know how much she'd spent. The coffee table held a stack of luxury home magazines, all bookmarked to pages featuring expensive renovations. I found what I was looking for in Jasmine's home office, a converted bedroom that she'd claimed as her creative space, despite having no apparent creative pursuits. Her desk was a shrine to organization. Color-coded files, labeled storage containers, and a bulletin board covered in what looked like a complex planning system. It was the bulletin board that made my hands shake. Pinned to the center was a printed photograph of my ring. Not a casual snapshot, but a professional quality close-up showing every detail of the sapphire and setting. Around this central image, Jasmine had created what could only be described as a research web. Printouts from gemology websites, screenshots of similar rings sold at auction houses, a handwritten list of jewelry dealers in Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, with several names circled in red ink. But the timeline took my breath away. In Jasmine's neat handwriting, a chronological list stretched down the right side of the board. December 15th, ring photographed during Christmas dinner prep. December 20th, initial online appraisal, 35 to 45K estimated. January 8th, contacted Morrison's Jewelry. Didn't identify myself. January 15th, researched Burma sapphire market trends. February 3rd, Thomas dies. Opportunity. February 20th, first casual mention to David about family heirlooms. March 10th, direct approach to Catherine, unsuccessful. The list continued through the spring and into summer, documenting every conversation, every attempt to acquire the ring, every strategy adjustment when one approach failed. At the bottom, written in fresh ink that couldn't have been more than a few days old, were the words, July 28th, success. Public ceremony August 15th, need legal documentation. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands steady, despite the rage building in my chest. This wasn't impulsive greed or even opportunistic manipulation. This was a months-long campaign, planned and executed with the precision of a military operation. Jasmine had been studying my ring, researching its value, and plotting to acquire it since before Thomas was even buried. But the worst discovery was yet to come.
In the desk's bottom drawer, I found a manila folder labeled Estate Planning in Jasmine's handwriting. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Photocopies of Thomas's will, insurance policies, and property deeds. Legal paperwork she had no right to possess, much less copy and study. Among these was a handwritten analysis, in her neat script, calculating the total value of Thomas's and my combined assets. Our house, our investments, our insurance policies, even the estimated value of furniture and artwork. Everything itemized and tallied with the efficiency of an accountant. At the bottom of the page, circled in red, was a total that represented our life's work, $847,000. Beside this figure, she'd written, D inherits 50% immediately upon C's death, remainder through estate. Ring represents 7% of total assets, acceptable loss for goodwill if necessary, but unnecessary if acquisition successful. The clinical language made me nauseous. Jasmine wasn't just planning to steal my ring. She was calculating the financial impact of my death and planning how to maximize David's inheritance. I was nothing more than a balance sheet entry to her, an obstacle between her and wealth she felt entitled to claim. But there was more. A second folder, this one labeled Legal Research, contained printouts about inheritance law, estate planning, and what appeared to be consultation notes from conversations with lawyers. The most recent document was dated just 3 days ago, a consultation summary from a law firm in Lancaster discussing, quote, options for challenging estate distributions in cases of diminished capacity due to grief, end quote. She was building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent if I didn't cooperate with her plans. I sat in her chair, surrounded by evidence of a betrayal so comprehensive it took my breath away, and felt something shift inside me. The polite, accommodating widow that everyone expected me to be, that I'd tried to be for the sake of family peace, was gone. In her place was someone Thomas would have recognized from our early years, when I'd fought city council members twice my age for better school funding and won. Before I left the house, I made one more discovery that sealed Jasmine's fate. On her computer, which she'd left unlocked in her haste to get to yoga class, I found her internet browsing history. The searches painted a damning picture of her true intentions. How to sell inherited jewelry without appraisal, private jewelry buyers, no questions asked, estate sale jewelry, quick cash, legal requirements, jewelry sale inheritance. But the most recent search, from just yesterday morning, was the most telling. How to have an elderly person declared incompetent, Pennsylvania.
I took screenshots of everything, my training as a former school board member kicking in. Thomas had always teased me about my compulsive documentation habits, but right now, I was grateful for every organized instinct I possessed. By the time I left their house, I had enough evidence to destroy Jasmine's reputation in Millfield permanently. But destroying her wasn't my goal. Justice was. And justice, I was learning, required careful planning and perfect timing. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Beverly Chen, my oldest friend and the former president of Millfield's Historical Society. Beverly had connections throughout the county's antique and art communities, relationships built over 30 years of organizing estate sales and charity auctions. Beverly, I need your help with something delicate. Can you meet me for tea tomorrow? Of course, Catherine. Is everything all right? Let's just say I need advice about protecting family assets from people who don't have family's best interests at heart. Beverly's voice sharpened with understanding. I'll be there at 2. The second call was to my nephew Richard, a lawyer in Philadelphia who specialized in estate planning. Richard was Thomas's sister's boy, now in his 40s and successful enough to handle family matters as favors rather than billable hours. Aunt Catherine, how are you holding up? I'm managing Richard, but I need some legal advice, and I need it to stay confidential. Of course. What's going on? I gave him the broad strokes, someone pressuring me to give away valuable property, concerns about my mental capacity being questioned, the need to protect assets from manipulation. I didn't mention names yet, but I could hear Richard's lawyer instincts kicking in. Aunt Catherine, this sounds serious. Are you being financially exploited? Possibly. I'll know more soon. But I want to make sure I have legal protections in place before things escalate. Absolutely. Can you come to Philadelphia next week? I'll set up a meeting with an elder law specialist who can help protect your interests. Perfect. And Richard, not a word to anyone in the family yet. I need to handle this carefully. The third call was the most important and the most difficult. I dialed the number for Detective Sarah Mitchell at the Millfield Police Department. Sarah had been in David's graduation class at Millfield High, and I'd known her since she was a teenager volunteering at the library, where I'd worked part-time for 20 years. Mrs. Holloway, what a nice surprise. How can I help you? Sarah? I need to report something, but I'm not sure what crime category it falls under. Can we meet privately to discuss it? Of course. Are you in immediate danger? No, nothing like that. But I believe someone is planning to defraud me of valuable property, and they may be building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent. I have evidence, but I need professional guidance on how to handle it. There was a pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice had shifted into professional mode. Mrs. Holloway, that sounds like potential elder abuse and fraud. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning? We'll want to document everything properly. Thank you, Sarah. And please, keep this confidential for now. There are family complications. Understood. We'll be discreet. That evening, as I sat in Thomas's chair reviewing the evidence I'd gathered, I felt something I hadn't experienced since his death. Purpose. For months, I'd been drifting through my days, going through the motions of living without really engaging with life. The Jasmine's betrayal had awakened something in me that I thought had died with Thomas. I wasn't just going to give her the ring at the Heritage Festival. I was going to give her exactly what she deserved. A public revelation of her true character that would leave her reputation in Millfield in ruins. But more than that, I was going to make sure she faced legal consequences for her attempted fraud. The Heritage Festival was still 10 days away. That gave me enough time to build an airtight case, gather additional evidence, and prepare a presentation that would expose every detail of her calculated betrayal. Jasmine thought she was manipulating a grieving widow. What she was actually dealing with was a woman who had spent 40 decades navigating small-town politics, organizing complex charitable events, and managing family finances with meticulous precision. A woman whose late husband had taught her that the best defense against bullies was a thorough understanding of their weaknesses. Thomas used to say that patience was the most underestimated weapon in any conflict. Jasmine was about to learn exactly what he meant. My meeting with Detective Sarah Mitchell the next morning took place in a small conference room at the Millfield police station, away from the bustle of the main office. Sarah had grown into a sharp, professional woman who commanded respect in a department that had been skeptical of female officers when she had first joined 15 years ago. Mrs. Holloway, what a nice surprise. How can I help you? I've reviewed the photos you sent me last night. This is extensive documentation of what appears to be premeditated fraud. Sarah spread the printed screenshots across the table between us, and the timeline alone shows clear intent to deceive and manipulate. But I need to understand your goals here before we proceed. What do you mean?
Are you looking to press criminal charges, or are you primarily interested in protecting yourself from further exploitation? Because the approach will be very different depending on what outcome you want. I'd been thinking about this question all night. Sarah, I want justice, but I also want to protect my son. David has no idea what his wife is really doing, and learning about it the wrong way could destroy him. Understood. Here's what I can offer. Sarah pulled out a legal pad and began outlining a strategy. We can document everything you've discovered as evidence of attempted elder fraud. Even if we don't immediately press charges, having an official police report creates a paper trail that protects you legally if she escalates her efforts. How so? If Jasmine tries to have you declared mentally incompetent, or if she claims later that you gave her the ring willingly without coercion, we'll have documented evidence of her deceptive practices. It strengthens your position considerably. Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. But Mrs. Holloway, I need to warn you about something. Cases like this often get worse before they get better. When people realize their manipulation isn't working, they sometimes become more aggressive,
Are you prepared for that possibility? I think so. What would more aggressive look like? Spreading rumors about your mental state, trying to turn family members against you, possibly even attempting to gain power of attorney or guardianship through false claims about your capacity. Sarah paused. In extreme cases, they might try to access your financial accounts or forge documents. The thought sent a chill through me, but it also strengthened my resolve. Then we need to make sure she doesn't get the chance. Agreed. Here's what I recommend. Sarah began writing on her legal pad. First, we document everything officially. I'll file a report about potential elder abuse and fraud. Second, you should consider having a comprehensive mental health evaluation done by an independent psychiatrist. I know that sounds unpleasant, but if she tries to claim you're incompetent, having recent professional documentation of your mental acuity will be invaluable. That's actually a brilliant idea. Third, we need to secure your assets. Do you have financial power of attorney arrangements in place? Everything is set up through my lawyer in Lancaster, but maybe I should review those documents with my nephew Richard. Definitely. And fourth, Sarah hesitated. This might be the hardest part. We need to consider whether to warn your son before the Heritage Festival or let events play out as you've planned. I'd been wrestling with this dilemma since discovering the extent of Jasmine's betrayal. Sarah, if I tell David now, he'll either think I'm paranoid or he'll confront Jasmine directly. Either way, she'll know I'm onto her and might disappear with whatever she can grab. That's a valid concern. But if we wait, David is going to be blindsided in a very public way. That could damage your relationship with him permanently. Or it could save him from years of being married to someone who sees him as a meal ticket. Sarah nodded slowly. That's true. Mrs. Holloway, you know your family better than I do. What does your gut tell you? I thought about David, sweet, trusting David, who'd never learned to see deception because Thomas and I had raised him in a household where honesty was assumed. My gut tells me that my son needs to see who his wife is, even if it hurts him, because living with a lie hurts worse in the long run. Then we proceed as planned. But I want you to promise me something. If Jasmine's behavior escalates between now and the festival, you call me immediately. Don't try to handle it alone. I promise. After leaving the police station, I drove to my appointment with Dr. Patricia Walsh, a psychiatrist recommended by Sarah who specialized in elder care and capacity evaluations. Dr. Walsh was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who put me through 2 hours of cognitive testing, memory assessments, and psychological evaluation. Mrs. Holloway, your test results are excellent. Your cognitive function is well above average for someone your age, and there's no indication of any mental health issues that would affect your judgment or decision-making capacity. Dr. Walsh handed me a formal report. I'm also going to provide you with a letter stating that, in my professional opinion, you are fully competent to manage your own affairs and make informed decisions about your property. How long is that evaluation valid? Legally, indefinitely, unless circumstances change significantly. But, practically speaking, if someone challenges your mental capacity in court, this recent evaluation would carry considerable weight. That afternoon, I met with Beverly Chen at my house. Beverly arrived carrying a leather portfolio that I recognized from her years of organizing estate sales for Millfield's wealthiest families. Catherine, I've been thinking about your situation all night. Based on what you told me yesterday, I think we need to discuss some options you might not have considered. We settled in my living room with tea, and Beverly opened her portfolio to reveal a collection of documents and photographs. I've been researching Burma sapphire sales from the last 5 years. Your ring, if it's authentic and in the condition you describe, is worth significantly more than Harold Morrison estimated. She showed me auction results from Sotheby's, Christie's, and other high-end auction houses. Catherine, Rings similar to yours, same era, same type of sapphire, similar settings, have sold for anywhere from $75,000 to over $100,000. I felt dizzy looking at the figures. Beverly, are you certain?
As certain as I can be without a formal appraisal from a major auction house. The Burma sapphire market has exploded because the mines are now permanently closed due to political instability. What your Thomas bought in 1952 has become a piece of gemological history. Beverly leaned forward, her expression intense. Catherine, if someone is trying to manipulate you into giving away a ring worth this much money, they're essentially trying to steal your financial security. This isn't just about sentiment anymore, this is about your future. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that when you confront this person at the Heritage Festival, you have professional backup. I can arrange for an appraiser from Philadelphia to be there, someone who can provide an immediate, authoritative valuation that will make it clear to everyone present exactly what's at stake. The idea was appealing, but I had concerns. Beverly, I don't want this to become a circus. My goal isn't to humiliate Jasmine, it's to expose her true motives and protect my family. Then we do it subtly. The appraiser attends as my guest, someone interested in historical jewelry. When the moment is right, I introduce him and ask him to comment on the ring. It will seem natural, not staged. And if Jasmine objects or tries to leave? Beverly smiled with the confidence of someone who'd navigated 30 years of delicate social situations. Catherine, I've handled difficult people at estate sales for decades. Trust me, I know how to manage a scene without making it obvious. That evening, I received an unexpected phone call that complicated everything. Mrs. Holloway, this is Dr. Amanda Foster from Lancaster General Hospital. Your son David asked me to call you. My heart stopped. Is David all right? David is fine, but his wife was brought to our emergency department this afternoon. She was in a minor car accident, nothing serious, just some bruising and a possible concussion. But she's been asking for you repeatedly. She seems quite distressed and keeps saying she needs to talk to you about something important before it's too late. I closed my eyes, recognizing the manipulation immediately. Jasmine had somehow learned that I was building a case against her. Perhaps she'd noticed signs of my search through her house, or maybe her lawyer contact had warned her about potential legal complications. Now she was trying to use a manufactured emergency to force a private conversation where she could assess how much I knew. Dr. Foster, is my son with her now? Yes, he's been here all afternoon. He seems very worried about her emotional state. She's been quite agitated, talking about family obligations and time running out. I see. Tell David I'll be there within the hour. After hanging up, I called Sarah Mitchell. Sarah, I think Jasmine knows I'm on to her. She's in the hospital claiming she needs to talk to me urgently about something important. That sounds like a trap, Mrs. Holloway. Don't go alone. I have to go. David is there, and if I don't show up, it'll look like I don't care about family emergencies. But you're right about not going alone. I can meet you there, as a family friend, checking on everyone's welfare. Perfect. Sarah, I think she's going to try to force the ring transfer tonight while she has David's sympathy and a medical situation to add urgency. Then we need to be prepared. Mrs. Holloway, do you have that formal psychiatric evaluation with you? Yes. Bring it. If she tries to question your mental state or decision-making capacity in front of David, we'll have immediate documentation to counter her claims. As I prepared to leave for the hospital, I realized that Jasmine had made a critical error of judgment. By accelerating her timeline and forcing a confrontation before the Heritage Festival, she was giving me the opportunity to expose her true nature in front of David without the pressure of a public ceremony. Sometimes the best traps are the ones your opponent builds for themselves. I slipped Thomas's ring off my finger and placed it in my jewelry box for the first time in 3 years. If Jasmine wanted to discuss the ring tonight, she'd have to explain why it was so urgent, and in doing so, she'd reveal the greed and calculation that had driven her months of manipulation. Thomas had always said that patience was a virtue.
But knowing when to abandon patience for decisive action was wisdom. Tonight, I would find out if 41 years to marriage to a very wise man had taught me the difference. Lancaster General Hospital's emergency department buzzed with the controlled chaos typical of a Friday evening. Sarah Mitchell met me in the parking lot, dressed in civilian clothes, but carrying herself with the alert posture that marked her as law enforcement, even when off duty. "How do you want to handle this?" she asked as we walked toward the entrance. "I want to give Jasmine enough rope to hang herself with, let her make her pitch, reveal her true motives, and document everything she says." I patted my purse where I'd placed a small digital recorder Sarah had provided. "Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state for recordings, correct?" "Correct. As long as you're part of the conversation, you can record it legally." Sarah paused at the hospital entrance. "Mrs. Holloway, are you prepared for your son to hear things that might change his perception of his wife permanently?" "Sarah, my son is married to a woman who's been planning to steal from his family since before his father was buried. He needs to know who he's sharing his life with, even if it destroys his illusions."
We found David in the waiting area outside the emergency department, his usually neat appearance disheveled with worry. When he saw me, relief flooded his features. "Mom, thank God you're here. Jasmine keeps asking for you, and the doctors say she needs to stay calm to recover from her concussion properly." "How did the accident happen?" David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that reminded me painfully of Thomas when he was stressed. "She was driving home from yoga class and said another car ran a red light, hit her passenger side, but not hard enough to deploy the airbags. She's mostly just shaken up, but she keeps talking about time running out and needing to settle family matters before something terrible happens." Sarah and I exchanged glances. The manufactured urgency was exactly what we'd expected. "David, this is Sarah Mitchell. She was in your graduating class, and she heard about the accident through the police scanner. She wanted to check on everyone." David shook Sarah's hand absently, his attention clearly focused on his wife's condition. "That's kind of you, Sarah. Jasmine's in room 3B. The doctors said she can have visitors, but they need to keep her stress levels down." As we walked toward Jasmine's room, I activated the recorder in my purse. Whatever happened next, I wanted documentation of every word. Jasmine was sitting up in the hospital bed, a small bandage on her forehead, and her auburn hair carefully arranged to frame her face despite her supposed distress. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears that looked remarkably controlled for someone with a head injury. "Catherine, oh, thank heavens you came. I've been so worried, and when that car hit me, all I could think about was how precious time is, how quickly things can change." "I'm glad you're all right, dear. David was very concerned." "I need to talk to you about something important, something I should have discussed weeks ago." Jasmine glanced at Sarah with obvious annoyance. "Could we have some privacy? This is a family matter." Sarah smiled pleasantly. "I'll wait outside. I just wanted to make sure everyone was okay." But instead of leaving, she positioned herself just outside the doorway, close enough to hear, but far enough to appear respectful of their privacy. David took the chair beside Jasmine's bed, holding her hand with gentle concern. "Honey, what's so urgent that it couldn't wait until you're feeling better?" "David, your mother and I discussed the ring, and I've been thinking about the ceremony at the Heritage Festival. I'm worried that waiting another week might be problematic." "Problematic how?" I asked, settling into the visitor's chair with calm curiosity. "Well, Catherine, you've been so generous in agreeing to pass the ring to me, but I've been researching the legal implications. If something happened to you before the transfer is completed—" She let the sentence hang, watching my reaction carefully. "What kind of legal implications?" Jasmine's voice took on a concerned, almost patronizing tone. "Inheritance law can be complicated when valuable items are involved. If the ring is still technically yours when your time comes, it could get tied up in probate for years. David might not be able to access his father's ring for a very long time." David frowned. "That's a pretty morbid thing to worry about right now." "I'm just being practical, darling. Your mother is getting older, and after losing Thomas, we have to face the reality that life is unpredictable." She turned back to me with wide, innocent eyes. "Catherine,
I think we should complete the transfer tonight, privately, so there are no complications later. You want me to give you the ring here in the hospital? I have the paperwork with me. Jasmine reached into the bedside table and pulled out a manila envelope, just a simple gift transfer document that makes everything official for everyone's protection. I opened the envelope and found a professionally prepared legal document declaring my intent to gift the ring to Jasmine in recognition of her marriage to my son and her commitment to honoring family traditions. At the bottom was a notarization section and signature lines. This is quite thorough, Jasmine. When did you have this prepared? Oh, I had my lawyer draft it weeks ago, just to be prepared when the right moment came. She was lying smoothly, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The notary public here at the hospital can witness the signatures tonight, and we'll have everything properly documented. David looked confused. Jasmine, why the sudden rush? Mom already agreed to give you the ring at the Heritage Festival. Why can't it wait another week? Because, David, your mother and I discussed the ring, and I've been thinking about the ceremony at the Heritage Festival. I'm worried that waiting another week might be problematic. The implication was unmistakable. I might not be thinking clearly much longer. Sarah had been right about Jasmine potentially questioning my mental capacity. That's an interesting perspective, Jasmine. I pulled the psychiatric evaluation from my purse. As it happens, I had my mental capacity professionally evaluated just yesterday. Dr. Patricia Walsh, a certified psychiatrist who specializes in elder care, found my cognitive function to be excellent and my decision-making capacity completely unimpaired.
I handed David the official report. She provided written documentation that I am fully competent to manage my own affairs and make informed decisions about my property. Jasmine's face went pale beneath her careful makeup. Why would you need a psychiatric evaluation? Because someone has been researching ways to have me declared mentally incompetent, and I wanted to make sure I had professional documentation of my mental acuity. The silence in the room was deafening. David looked up from the psychiatric report with growing alarm. Mom, what are you talking about? Who would try to have you declared incompetent? I reached into my purse and pulled out printed copies of the screenshots I'd taken from Jasmine's computer. Someone who spent considerable time researching Pennsylvania law regarding challenging estate distributions and having elderly people declared incapable of managing their affairs. I handed David the printouts showing Jasmine's internet search history. His face went white as he read through the list of searches. Jasmine, what is this? David, I can explain. I was just researching options in case your mother's grief started affecting her judgment. I was trying to protect your family's interests. By researching how to have my mother declared mentally incompetent? Not to use against her, just to understand the legal landscape in case someone else tried to take advantage of her vulnerable state. I pulled out the photographs of her bulletin board research project. Someone like you, perhaps. David stared at the images of his wife's meticulous planning, the timeline documenting months of manipulation, the calculated assessment of our family's assets. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Jasmine, you photographed Mom's ring back in December, before Dad even died? David, I can explain. Am I? He stood up abruptly, the psychiatric report crumpling in his grip. Because what I'm seeing is evidence that my wife has been planning to manipulate my grieving mother out of her most precious possession since before my father was buried. Jasmine's careful composure finally cracked. That ring is worth over $60,000, David. It's been sitting on her finger doing nothing while we're trying to save for a house, for our future, for children we want to have. Your mother has no idea what she's sitting on. So you decided to steal it? I decided to make sure it stayed in the family where it belongs. Your father would have wanted his son to benefit from that ring, not have it buried with some old woman who's too sentimental to understand its real value. The casual cruelty of calling me some old woman in front of my son was the final nail in Jasmine's coffin. David's expression shifted from confusion to disgust. Jasmine, how could you say something like that about my mother? Because I'm being realistic.
David, your mother is 63 years old and alone. She doesn't need a $60,000 ring. We do. We're young, we're building a life together. We could use that money for so many practical things. It's not about the money. Of course it's about the money. David, wake up. Your parents were worth almost $1 million. When your mother dies, you'll inherit everything anyway. I'm just trying to help us access part of that inheritance while it can actually benefit our lives. The room fell silent except for the beeping of medical equipment from nearby rooms. David stared at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time, which in many ways he was. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her professional demeanor intact. I am sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing the conversation. Mrs. Caldwell, are you aware that attempting to defraud an elderly person of valuable property constitutes a felony in Pennsylvania? Jasmine's eyes widened with panic. I wasn't defrauding anyone. This was going to be a legal gift transfer. Obtained through deception, manipulation, and threats regarding mental competency. That meets the legal definition of elder abuse and fraud. Sarah stepped fully into the room. Mrs. Holloway, would you like to press charges? I looked at David, whose face was a mask of pain and betrayal, then at Jasmine, whose beautiful features were twisted with desperation and anger. Not tonight, I said quietly. I think my son needs time to process what he's learned about his wife. But Jasmine, if you ever contact me again about the ring, or anything else related to our family's assets, I will prosecute you to the full extent of the law. I stood up and placed a gentle hand on David's shoulder. Son, you're welcome at home anytime. You'll always have a place there. As Sarah and I left the hospital room, I could hear Jasmine beginning to cry, real tears this time, born of desperation rather than manipulation. She had gambled everything on her ability to manipulate a grieving widow and had instead exposed herself to the one person whose opinion mattered most to her future. David would have to decide what to do with his marriage, but my part in this drama was almost finished. The Heritage Festival was still a week away, and I had every intention of keeping my promise to give Jasmine the ring. After all, I'd never specified which ring I planned to give her.
The week following the hospital confrontation passed in an eerie calm that reminded me of the stillness before thunderstorms in Thomas's beloved rose garden. David had moved back into his childhood bedroom without explanation to anyone but me, telling neighbors and coworkers that he was helping me prepare for the Heritage Festival. Jasmine, meanwhile, had launched what could only be described as a charm offensive that would have impressed seasoned politicians. She appeared at the Millfield Community Center on Monday morning with a casserole for the annual bake sale, chatting warmly with longtime residents about the importance of preserving family traditions. By Tuesday, she was volunteering at the library's book drive, making pointed comments about how grateful she was to be part of such a close-knit community. Wednesday found her at Morrison's Fine Jewelry, loudly discussing with Harold the beautiful ceremony planned for the Heritage Festival and how honored she felt to be trusted with such a precious family heirloom. Harold called me that evening. Catherine, I'm not sure what game that young woman is playing, but she spent an hour in my store today talking about the ring transfer as if it were a done deal. She even asked about having it resized immediately after the ceremony. What did you tell her? That any modifications to such a valuable piece would require written authorization from the current owner. Harold paused. Catherine, she also asked some very specific questions about insurance policies and ownership transfer documentation. It felt less like curiosity and more like she was planning something. I wasn't surprised. Jasmine was clearly trying to control the narrative, establishing herself publicly as the rightful recipient of the ring, while creating witnesses to what she wanted to portray as my willing transfer. What she didn't know was that her public campaign was actually helping me build my case. Beverly Chen had been busy as well. The appraiser from Philadelphia, Dr. Marcus Steinberg, would attend the festival as Beverly's guest, introduced as a collector of military-era jewelry interested in the historical aspects of Thomas's ring.
Beverly had also arranged for discreet documentation of the ceremony, hiring a professional photographer under the guise of capturing the festival's highlights for the Historical Society's archives. "Catherine, we'll have everything recorded," Beverly assured me during our final planning meeting. "Audio, video, photographs, and professional witness testimony. Whatever happens at that ceremony, there will be no ambiguity about what was said or done." But it was Thursday evening that revealed the true extent of Jasmine's desperation and overconfidence. I was in my kitchen preparing dinner when I heard familiar voices in the garden. Jasmine and David were standing by Thomas's rose arbor, the same spot where Thomas had proposed 42 years ago. I cracked the kitchen window slightly and listened. "David, you're being completely unreasonable about this. Your mother agreed to give me the ring, and now you're making her doubt her own decision." "Jasmine, after what I learned at the hospital, I'm questioning everything about our marriage." "What you learned was taken completely out of context. I was researching legal protections for your mother, not ways to hurt her. And yes, I photographed the ring, but only because I wanted to understand what we were dealing with when she offered it to me. I had to admire her persistence, even as her lies became more elaborate. She didn't offer it to you, Jasmine. You demanded it. I suggested it would be meaningful for the ring to continue serving its purpose with young people who could honor its legacy. That's completely different than demanding it." David was quiet for a long moment. "Jasmine, do you even love me? Or am I just a convenient path to my parents' money?" "How can you ask me that? Of course I love you. But, David, love doesn't pay for mortgages or children's educations or retirement planning. Your parents built something valuable, and you're their heir. I'm just trying to help us secure our future together. By manipulating my grieving mother? By accepting a gift she's freely offering? David, tomorrow at the Heritage Festival, your mother is going to give me that ring in front of the entire town. She'll make a speech about family legacy and passing traditions to the next generation, and everyone will applaud her generosity. This conversation we're having right now will seem ridiculous in hindsight." There was a rustling sound, and I saw them moving closer to each other near the garden bench Thomas had built for our 20th anniversary.
Jasmine, if you go through with this ceremony tomorrow, if you accept that ring knowing what I know about how you've manipulated the situation, I won't be able to stay married to you. David, you're being dramatic. Once we have the ring, once it's legally transferred and documented, you'll understand that I was just looking out for our family's interests. Your mother will be fine. She'll probably be relieved not to have the responsibility of such a valuable piece anymore. You really don't understand what that ring means to her, do you? I understand that it's a piece of jewelry from a dead man, and dead men don't need jewelry. I also understand that it represents financial security for our future children, money for a better house, resources for opportunities your mother will never need again. The casual dismissal of Thomas's memory, the reduction of our 41-year marriage to a piece of jewelry from a dead man, ignited a fury in me that I hadn't felt since the night Thomas died, and I realized how alone I would be. David, you're being dramatic. Once we have the ring, once it's legally transferred and documented, you'll understand that I was just looking out for our family's interests. Your mother will be fine. She'll probably be relieved not to have the responsibility of such a valuable piece anymore. You really don't understand what that ring means to her, do you? I understand that it's a piece of jewelry from a dead man, and dead men don't need jewelry. I also understand that it represents financial security for our future children, money for a better house, resources for opportunities your mother will never need again. David, I know you think you're protecting your mother, but you're actually enabling her to make a decision based on emotion rather than logic. Tomorrow, when she gives me that ring, it will be the right thing for everyone involved. And if she changes her mind, if she decides not to go through with it? Jasmine's laugh was cold and confident.
She won't change her mind. Your mother is too polite, too concerned with appearances, too invested in being seen as the generous matriarch. She's committed to this ceremony in front of the whole town, and she'll never embarrass herself by backing out now. You sound very certain about that. I am certain. I've spent months studying your mother's personality, her social patterns, her psychological weak points. She values her reputation above almost everything else. And that reputation depends on being seen as gracious and generous. Tomorrow, she'll perform exactly as expected because the alternative, publicly refusing to honor her own commitment, would damage her standing in this community permanently. I felt my hands clenching into fists as I listened to Jasmine dissect my character like a scientist analyzing a laboratory specimen. She thought she had me completely figured out, reduced to a series of predictable responses and exploitable weaknesses. Jasmine, what if you're wrong about her? I'm not wrong. Your mother is a conventional small-town woman who spent her entire adult life following social expectations and maintaining appearances. She committed to giving me this ring publicly, and her own need to be seen as honorable will force her to follow through. Even after everything that happened at the hospital? Especially after what happened at the hospital. She knows that if she backs out now, everyone will ask why. She'd have to explain about our argument, about the legal documents, about her concerns regarding my motives. That would mean admitting she made a commitment she couldn't keep and creating a public family scandal. Jasmine's voice carried absolute conviction. Your mother would rather give me the ring than face that kind of social humiliation. David was quiet for so long I wondered if he'd left the garden. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat with resignation. Jasmine, I hope you're wrong about my mother. Because if you're right, if she's really that predictable and manipulable, then you've destroyed any chance of having a real relationship with our family. Jasmine, family relationships are built on mutual benefit and shared interests. Once I have the ring, once we've established our position in the family hierarchy, we can work on rebuilding trust and affection. But first, we need to secure our assets. Their footsteps moved away from the garden, and I heard the front gate close as they left through the side yard. I remained at the kitchen window for a long time, staring out at Thomas's roses and thinking about what I'd just heard. Jasmine was absolutely convinced she had me trapped by my own social conditioning and need for community approval. She believed I was too weak, too conventional, too concerned with appearances to deviate from the path she'd maneuvered me onto. In her mind, I was nothing more than a predictable small-town widow whose behavior could be calculated and controlled. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. But first, I had one more preparation to complete. I walked to my bedroom and opened the jewelry box where I'd placed Thomas's ring after removing it from my finger at the hospital. Beside it was another ring, a simple gold band I'd bought years ago as a backup for occasions when I didn't want to risk wearing Thomas's valuable sapphire ring to gardening club meetings or church potluck dinners. The backup ring was pretty enough, worth maybe $200, and bore enough resemblance to Thomas's ring that casual observers might not immediately notice the substitution. I'd worn it exactly once, to a charity fundraiser where I was doing hands-on volunteer work and didn't want to damage the sapphire. I slipped the backup ring onto my finger and looked at myself in the bedroom mirror. Tomorrow at the Heritage Festival, I would indeed give Jasmine a ring from my late husband. I would make a speech about family legacy and the importance of understanding what real love costs. And Jasmine would get exactly what she deserved. Thomas had always said that the most dangerous opponents were those who underestimated their adversaries. Jasmine had spent months studying what she thought were my weaknesses, never considering that those same qualities might also be sources of strength.
She was about to discover that a woman who'd spent 4 decades maintaining her family's reputation and community standing had learned a few things about managing public performances and controlling narratives. The Heritage Festival ceremony would indeed be exactly what she expected. right up until the moment it became something else entirely. The Millfield Heritage Festival had drawn its largest crowd in 15 years. Main Street was blocked off from elm to maple, lined with booths selling homemade crafts, local honey, and kettle corn that filled the air with the scent of caramel and salt. The Historical Society had set up their main display on the courthouse steps, where a small stage had been erected for presentations and ceremonies. I arrived at 11 a.m. wearing my navy blue dress, the one Thomas had always said brought out my eyes, and the backup ring glinting quietly on my finger. Beverly Chen greeted me with a knowing smile, her guest, Dr. Steinberg, standing beside her with the patient expression of a man accustomed to waiting for the right moment. "Catherine, you look lovely. Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for months, Beverly. Is everything in place?" The photographer is positioned by the gazebo, the audio recording equipment is discreetly placed near the stage, and Dr. Steinberg has his appraisal materials ready. Beverly lowered her voice. "And Sarah Mitchell is here in her official capacity at the request of the Historical Society for security purposes." I spotted Sarah near the information booth, dressed in her uniform and chatting casually with festival organizers while keeping a clear view of the stage area. The morning passed with the comfortable rhythm of small-town celebrations. I judged the apple pie contest, admired quilts at the craft booth, and accepted condolences and compliments from neighbors who still treated me with the gentle deference reserved for recent widows. But I could feel the anticipation building as word spread that the ring ceremony would take place at 2 p.m. Jasmine arrived at 1:30, and I had to admit she'd chosen her appearance carefully. She wore a flowing white summer dress that made her look young and innocent, her auburn hair arranged in soft waves that caught the afternoon sunlight. She'd brought her parents, Robert and Patricia Caldwell from Hartford, who surveyed the festival with the polite interest of city people visiting quaint rural attractions. David walked beside his wife with the hollow expression of a man going through motions he no longer believed in. When he saw me, he approached with obvious reluctance. "Mom, are you sure you want to do this? It's not too late to change your mind." "David, I made a commitment to your wife, and I intend to honor it. The ring ceremony will proceed exactly as planned." Relief flickered across Jasmine's face as she overheard our exchange. She stepped forward with a radiant smile, playing her role of the grateful daughter-in-law perfectly. "Catherine, I can't tell you how much this means to me. To be trusted with such a precious family heirloom, to carry on Thomas's legacy, it's an honor I'll treasure forever." "I'm sure you will, dear. Shall we begin?" Mayor Henderson introduced the ceremony with remarks about the importance of preserving family traditions and honoring the military service members who'd helped build Millfield's community. The crowd gathered around the courthouse steps, perhaps 50 people in total, including several members of the press from the county newspaper. Beverly took the microphone first, explaining the historical significance of jewelry crafted for American servicemen during the Korean War, and introducing Dr. Steinberg as an expert in military-era pieces. Then she called me to the stage. I looked out over the faces of people who'd known me for decades, neighbors who'd attended Thomas's funeral, friends who'd watched me build a life in this community. These were the people Jasmine believed would force me to go through with a ceremony I might regret, simply to maintain appearances. Thank you all for joining us today to witness something very special. 41 years ago, my late husband Thomas gave me a ring that represented everything we hoped to build together. Today, I'm here to pass that ring to someone who I believe truly understands its value. Jasmine stepped forward with a radiant smile, her eyes bright with anticipated triumph. The crowd murmured appreciatively, and I saw her parents beaming with pride. Before I present the ring, however, I think it's important that everyone understand what they're witnessing. Dr. Steinberg, would you please explain the historical and monetary value of Korean War-era Burma sapphire jewelry? Dr. Steinberg approached the microphone with professional authority. Certainly.
Rings like the one Mrs. Holloway possesses represent some of the finest examples of military commission jewelry from the 1950s. The Burmese sapphires from that era, particularly those from the mines that closed due to political instability, are now considered extremely rare. Depending on the specific characteristics of the stone and setting, such pieces can be worth anywhere from $75,000 to over $100,000. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Jasmine's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. This was all part of the ceremony she expected, the dramatic revelation of the ring's value to emphasize the magnitude of my generosity. Thank you, Dr. Steinberg. Now, Jasmine, before I give you this ring, I'd like you to share with everyone why you feel you deserve to inherit such a valuable and meaningful piece. This wasn't part of the script Jasmine had anticipated. She glanced around nervously before stepping to the microphone.
Well, I'm honored to be part of the Holloway family, and I understand the importance of preserving Thomas's memory through his legacy. That's lovely, dear. But I think people would be interested to know more about your specific plans for the ring. You've done extensive research on its value, haven't you? Jasmine's face went pale. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and connected it to the portable speaker Beverly had arranged. I mean your research timeline, which began in December when you first photographed the ring during Christmas dinner preparation. The crowd listened in stunned silence as I played the recording from Jasmine's garden conversation with David, her voice clearly audible as she dismissed Thomas's memory and calculated the ring's monetary value. Her casual reference to me as some old woman and her cold analysis of when I might die drew audible gasps from people who'd known me for decades. "Catherine, stop this immediately," Jasmine hissed, stepping toward me with fury replacing her carefully maintained composure. "I'm sorry, dear, but I think it's important that everyone understand your true relationship with family legacy." I switched to the hospital recording, where Jasmine's voice described her research into having me declared mentally incompetent and her frustration with my sentimental attachment to worthless traditions. The crowd's mood shifted palpably. These were people who valued genuine emotion and family loyalty above material considerations. Hearing Jasmine reduce a 41-year marriage to jewelry from a dead man while plotting to manipulate a grieving widow struck them as fundamentally obscene. "You're taking everything out of context," Jasmine shouted, abandoning all pretense of dignity. "David, tell them this is ridiculous." But David was staring at his wife with undisguised disgust. "Jasmine, everything they're hearing is your own words, your own voice describing your own plans. Plans to protect our family's interests, plans to secure our future. Plans to steal from my mother and have her declared mentally incompetent if she didn't cooperate." Dr. Steinberg stepped forward with clinical precision. "I'd like to examine the ring in question before any transfer takes place, if I may." I removed the backup ring from my finger and handed it to him. He studied it briefly through his jeweler's loupe before looking up with professional neutrality. "This is a lovely piece, but it's not a Burma sapphire ring from the Korean War era. This appears to be a contemporary gold band with a synthetic stone, worth perhaps $200. The crowd buzzed with confusion. Jasmine stared at the ring in Dr. Steinberg's hand with dawning horror. "Where's the real ring?" she demanded. "The real ring is safely secured, dear. Just as I promised, I'm giving you a ring from my late husband. This backup ring he bought me for occasions when I didn't want to risk wearing the valuable one." "You can't do this. You promised me the sapphire ring." "I promised to give you a ring, and I promised you'd regret demanding it. Both promises kept." Sarah Mitchell stepped forward, her uniform and badge making her authority clear. "Mrs. Caldwell, you're creating a public disturbance. I suggest you calm down." "This is fraud! She led me to believe I was getting the valuable ring."
Actually, Sarah said calmly, fraud requires deception for financial gain. Mrs. Holloway never deceived you about anything. She simply gave you exactly what you asked for, while protecting herself from your attempted manipulation. Beverly took the microphone back. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've witnessed something very important today. We've seen what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness and assumes that grief makes people vulnerable to exploitation. The crowd applauded, but it wasn't the warm, approving applause Jasmine had expected for a heartwarming family ceremony. It was the sharp, satisfied applause of people who'd watched justice served. Jasmine looked around desperately, searching for sympathy or support, but found only disapproving faces and shaking heads. Her parents stood frozen in mortification, clearly understanding that their daughter's behavior had been exposed to an entire community. David, we're leaving, now! No, Jasmine, you're leaving. I'm staying to apologize to my mother and this community for bringing someone like you into their midst. You can't be serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Jasmine grabbed for the backup ring in Dr. Steinberg's hand, but he stepped away smoothly. Ma'am, this ring was given to you in a legal ceremony with multiple witnesses. If you'd like to keep it, that's your right. But based on what we've all heard today, I'd suggest you consider whether accepting any gift from Mrs. Holloway serves your best interests. The implication was clear. Accepting the ring after her behavior had been exposed would be tantamount to admitting her attempted fraud in front of 50 witnesses and a police officer. Jasmine looked at the cheap ring, then at the hostile faces surrounding her, then at her husband, who was no longer her ally. With a sound that was half sob and half scream, she pushed through the crowd and ran toward the parking area. Her parents hurried after her, but not before her father stopped to speak quietly with David. Son, we had no idea. We're mortified by our daughter's behavior. Please give our apologies to your mother. As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement about the drama they'd witnessed, I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Mrs. Patterson, my former neighbor who'd known Thomas and me for 30 years.
Catherine, honey, that was the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. That girl thought she could take advantage of your good nature, and you showed her exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman with backbone. Dr. Steinberg approached with professional admiration. Mrs. Holloway, that was masterfully handled. You gave her exactly what she legally asked for while protecting your valuable asset and exposing her true motives. Brilliant. Sarah Mitchell joined us with a satisfied smile. The recording evidence you gathered will be sufficient for prosecution if she attempts any retaliation. You've protected yourself legally while delivering perfect poetic justice. As the festival continued around us, I stood with my son and watched the community that Jasmine had tried to manipulate against me rally around our family instead. She'd been so certain she understood how small-town social dynamics worked, so confident that appearances mattered more than substance. What she'd failed to understand was that this community had 40 years of experience with my character. They knew the difference between genuine grace and calculated manipulation, between real grief and performed emotion, between a woman deserving protection and one exploiting that protection for personal gain. Thomas would have been proud. 3 months after the Heritage Festival, I sat in my kitchen on a crisp October morning, watching David install new locks on the doors of what had once been his marital home on Maple Street. The divorce proceedings had moved with surprising speed once Jasmine realized that fighting David in court would mean exposing her behavior to even more public scrutiny. She'd left Millfield the day after the festival, returning to her parents' house in Hartford with nothing but her personal belongings and the cheap ack-up ring she'd ultimately decided to keep. Perhaps it served as a reminder of what happened when greed overrode judgment, or perhaps she simply couldn't bear to leave completely empty-handed. Mom, I found something you should see. David entered the kitchen holding a manila folder I recognized from my search of Jasmine's office. She left this behind, probably in her rush to pack. I thought you might want to know how deep this went. Inside the folder were documents I hadn't discovered during my initial investigation. Correspondence with a private investigator in Philadelphia who'd been researching our family's financial background, consultations with 3 different lawyers about estate law and inheritance challenges, and, most disturbing of all,
a detailed medical history she'd somehow obtained about my health records. David, how did she get access to my medical information? I think she used my name and relationship to you to request information from Dr. Martinez's office, claiming she needed it for family health history purposes. His voice carried a mixture of anger and shame. Mom, I'm so sorry. I gave her access to our family because I trusted her, and she used that trust to violate your privacy in ways I never could have imagined. I studied the medical report, which documented my excellent health, and specifically noted the absence of any cognitive decline or memory issues. The margins were filled with Jasmine's handwriting, noting dates and looking for patterns that might suggest developing dementia or other conditions that could support a mental incompetency claim. She was planning this for much longer than we realized, I said quietly. The investigator's report is dated 8 months ago, Mom. She was researching our family's assets before she even married me. The investigator's findings were thorough and chilling. He documented our property values, investment accounts, insurance policies, and even Thomas's pension benefits. At the bottom of his report, he'd provided what he called a target assessment. I was classified as a high-value, low-risk target due to my age, recent loss of spouse, and perceived social isolation. David, I need you to understand something. This isn't your fault. Jasmine is a predator who specifically targeted our family because she identified us as vulnerable and wealthy. If it hadn't been you, it would have been someone else's son, someone else's family. But I brought her into our lives. I married her without really knowing who she was. You married the person she presented herself to be. The person she actually was remained hidden until circumstances forced her to reveal her true nature. David, the fact that you were deceived doesn't make you naive. It makes you someone who believes in the fundamental goodness of people. That's not a flaw to be corrected. It's a quality to be protected. We spent the morning going through the house, removing the last traces of Jasmine's presence. In her closet, we found price tags from expensive clothing she'd purchased but never worn, as if she'd been stockpiling items for a lifestyle she expected to afford once she gained access to our family's assets. Her jewelry box contained receipts and appraisals for pieces she'd bought using money from joint accounts with David, all of it documented with the meticulous record-keeping of someone planning to liquidate assets quickly. She turned our marriage into a business transaction, David said, staring at a spreadsheet she'd created tracking his income and spending patterns. I thought we were building a life together, but she was calculating return on investment. That afternoon, Beverly Chen called with news that brought a sense of closure to the entire ordeal. Catherine, I thought you should know. Dr. Steinberg has formally requested to purchase Thomas's ring for a private collector who specializes in Korean War military artifacts. He's offering $115,000.
The amount took my breath away. Thomas's sacrifice in trading his family heirlooms for that ring had created something worth more than either of us could have imagined. Beverly, I'm not ready to sell it yet, but it's good to know the option exists if I ever need it. Of course. But, Catherine, Dr. Steinberg wanted me to tell you something else. He said he's seen many cases of people trying to manipulate elderly individuals out of valuable items, and he's never witnessed such a perfect example of the victim turning the tables on their would-be exploiter. He's actually planning to write about your case for a journal article about protecting seniors from financial fraud. I hope it helps other people recognize the warning signs. Oh, it will. The recordings you made, the systematic way you documented everything, the strategic patience you showed, it's a masterclass in self-protection. That evening, Sarah Mitchell stopped by with official news about Jasmine's fate. Catherine, I wanted to update you on the investigation. Based on the evidence you provided, we've been in contact with authorities in Connecticut. It turns out Jasmine has a history of targeting wealthy older individuals for financial manipulation. You weren't her first victim, just the first one smart enough to fight back effectively. Other victims? An elderly widower in Hartford whose jewelry collection went missing after he befriended her, a woman in New Haven who signed over power of attorney to Jasmine after being convinced she was developing memory problems. The pattern is consistent. She identifies vulnerable targets, gains their trust, then systematically exploits their assets. Shara handed me a legal document.
The Connecticut authorities are building a case against her for elder abuse and fraud. Your documentation and recordings are being used as evidence to establish her pattern of behavior. There is a very good chance she'll face serious criminal charges. What about the other victims? Your case is helping them too. Some of them were too embarrassed or confused to report what happened, but seeing how you handled the situation has given them courage to come forward. You may have saved other families from going through what you experienced. As autumn deepened into winter, life in Millfield settled into a new rhythm. David moved back into his childhood bedroom permanently, taking over maintenance of Thomas's garden and slowly beginning to heal from the betrayal that had shattered his marriage. We developed evening routines that reminded me of the early years after he'd graduated college, when he'd lived at home briefly before starting his career at the bank. "Mom, I've been thinking about something," he said one December evening as we decorated the Christmas tree Thomas and I had put up every year for 4 decades. "I want to make sure something like this never happens to our family again." "What do you mean?" "I want to establish legal protections for you, for both of us. Trust documents, power of attorney arrangements, financial safeguards that would make it impossible for someone to manipulate either of us the way Jasmine tried to manipulate you." "That's a wise idea, David. And I want to create a foundation in Thomas's memory, something that educates people about financial fraud targeting seniors. We could use part of the money from selling the ring, if you ever decide to sell it, to fund programs that teach older adults how to protect themselves." The idea appealed to me more than I had expected. Thomas had spent his life teaching and protecting young people. A foundation that taught and protected older adults would be a fitting legacy for his memory. On Christmas morning, I gave David a wrapped box containing Thomas's real sapphire ring. "Mom, I can't accept this. It's worth a fortune, and after everything that happened?" "David, this ring was meant to represent the values your father and I built our marriage on: sacrifice, commitment, and the kind of love that puts family above personal gain. Jasmine wanted it because of its monetary value. You should have it because you understand what it actually represents." He held the ring up to the morning light streaming through the kitchen window, the Burma sapphire casting teeny blue reflections on the wall. "Mom, what if I meet someone else someday, someone I want to marry? Then you'll give this ring to someone who proves they love you more than they love what you can provide for them. Someone who would give up the ring themselves rather than see you manipulated or hurt." I smiled at my son, this good man who'd learned hard lessons about trust and judgment, but hadn't let those lessons make him cynical. "Your father always said the best way to honor a gift is to pass it on to someone worthy of receiving it." 6 months later, David met Rebecca Torres, a school librarian who drove a 15-year-old Honda and spent her weekends volunteering at the animal shelter. When he told her the story of Thomas's ring and what it had cost our family, she cried, not because of its value, but because of the pain Jasmine's greed had caused people she was coming to care about. "I never want you to feel like you have to prove your worth to me," David told her on the evening he proposed. "But if you'll accept it, this ring comes with the responsibility of understanding what real love costs."
Rebecca accepted both the ring and the responsibility, and when I saw her wearing it for the first time, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Thomas's death: complete peace about the future. The backup ring, the one Jasmine had ultimately kept, served its own purpose as well. Harold Morrison told me that word had spread throughout the regional jewelry community about what happened at the Heritage Festival. The story of the widow who outsmarted her would-be exploiter had become something of a legend, and other jewelers were using it to educate customers about protecting valuable assets from family manipulation. Catherine, you've probably prevented dozens of similar frauds just by showing people that seniors aren't easy targets when they're properly prepared and supported, Harold said during one of my visits to his shop. Now, as I write this account 2 years after the Heritage Festival, I'm struck by how much my life has changed.
David and Rebecca have given me 2 grandchildren who play in Thomas's garden and listen to stories about their grandfather's service in Korea. The foundation we established in Thomas's memory has helped over 300 seniors across Pennsylvania protect themselves from financial fraud. And Jasmine? She was convicted on multiple counts of elder abuse and fraud, sentenced to 4 years in prison, and ordered to pay restitution to her victims. The last I heard, she was working in the prison library, perhaps finally learning the difference between the value of things and their worth. The real lesson of this experience isn't about outsmarting manipulators or protecting valuable assets, though both of those things matter. It's about understanding that kindness and strength aren't opposites. They're complementary forces that become more powerful when used together. Thomas used to say that the measure of a person's character isn't what they do when they think they're winning, but what they do when they think they're losing. Jasmine revealed her character when she thought she was losing control of the situation she'd so carefully manipulated. I discovered mine when I realized that protecting my family required more than polite accommodation and gentle trust. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to be a victim, not just for your own sake, but for the sake of everyone who depends on your strength to keep them safe. Thomas's ring continues to sparkle on Rebecca's finger, representing not just the love that created it, but the wisdom that preserved it. And every time I see it catch the light, I'm reminded that the most precious things in life aren't valuable because of what they cost, but because of what they represent. The triumph of genuine love over calculated greed, of patient wisdom over impulsive manipulation, and of family bonds that grow stronger when tested by those who would exploit them. That, more than any monetary value, is a legacy worth protecting. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.